I first read over this lesson while I was sitting in Hart Plaza in downtown Detroit, and it was such a beautiful day. The sun was shining, I saw children playing, some were playing in the fountain out there, there were couples walking around, even the homeless were sitting out there enjoying the sunshine. They weren't bothering anybody, they just were sitting there enjoying the day. Everybody was talking to each other, people were taking pictures, sitting in the shade, getting suntans, whatever. Some was looking over the Detroit River. Just a beautiful day. And I thought about that. I thought about our subject, committed to hope, even in pain. And Detroit is going through a painful phase. Decline in population, which of course means a decline in tax base. There's been decline in a lot of areas. The schools have declined through the years. Even just in the last 8 years since I graduated from high school, it's been a decline, further decline. People don't want to teach in the city. Budgets are drying up. There's so many things negatives, but there's so many good things. Downtown Detroit has new hotels, new restaurants, other businesses. The streets have been cleaned up. There's new areas down there. They have a skating rink. So many good things. Even further out into the neighborhoods, into the innermost part of the city, we have new developments, new businesses, new industries emerging, technologies and factories. We have new residences being built, townhouses, condominiums, lofts being built all throughout the city. So we have to find hope even in pain. Even as we rebuild, we have to look at the hope and do things step by step. And this is what our lesson today is about. Finding hope even in the midst of pain. Now, first outline is Siege of Jerusalem, 2 Kings, the 25th chapter, the first and second verses, then the 5th through the 7th verses. We're going to start with verses 1 and 2. And it came to pass in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came, he and all his hosts, against Jerusalem, and pitched against it. And they built forts against it round about. And the city was besieged unto the 11th year of King Zedekiah. Now, it was the 10th month, which means it was the winter time. And back in that day, quote-unquote, polite warfare, people didn't start wars in the winter because it was hard even on their own troops fighting in the winter months. Yet Nebuchadnezzar was being led by God, so he started right in the winter months, which caught Jerusalem off guard, which is why they really failed to the Babylonians. Go down to verse 5. And the army of the Chaldees pursued after the king, and overtook him in the plains of Jericho, and all his army were scattered from him. And the Chaldees are Chaldeans, and the Babylonians are the one and the same. They're just called these two different names interchangeably. And when it says all his armies were scattered from him, that's King James Version saying it in a nice way, but really, you look in the original language, they deserted him. So Zedekiah's army fled, they deserted him and left him there to be overtaken by the Babylonians. Go to verse 6. So they took the king and brought him up to the king of Babylon, to Riblah, and they gave judgment upon him. Now Zedekiah, the reason he's in this position is because he staged a coup against them, against Babylon. But if he had listened to Jeremiah and some of the other prophets, he would have known that it was God that orchestrated Nebuchadnezzar overtaking Jerusalem. If he had listened to God's prophets and God's word, he would not have tried to stage a coup. So now Zedekiah is being led back to Babylon, and he knows he's in for a horrible fate. He just doesn't know what it is. So each step is getting worse and worse for him as he goes toward his fate. And verse 7 gives his horrible fate. And they slew the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes, and put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and bound him with fetters of brass, and carried him to Babylon. So it wasn't bad enough that they burned his eyes out, which has got to be horrible. Right before that, the last sight that Zedekiah saw was his sons being killed. Could you imagine that? Seeing your children being killed before you, then right after that your eyes are burned out. So for the rest of Zedekiah's life, he probably had nightmares, what have you, more likely than not. His last sight was his sons being killed. What a horrible fate. But he had that fate because he did not obey God and his true prophets. If he had obeyed them, he would have never staged a coup, and he would have never been in that situation. Yes, he would have been a quote-unquote puppet king, but at least he would have been alive, and his sons would have been alive, and he could have had his generations live until it was time for Jerusalem to be fully restored to its former glory. Because he did not listen to God's word and to God's prophets, his sons were killed, and his eyes were burned out. What a horrible fate when we don't trust in God's word. Let us go down now to the second outline, which is statements of Jeremiah. We find this in the 3rd chapter of Lamentations, the 25th to the 33rd verses. Then we skip down to verses 55 through 58. Lamentations means grieving or crying. That's why Jeremiah is known as the crying prophet. But as we're going to see in these verses, he was not a crybaby. This was not complaining. This is a person who was able to find hope even in pain. Let us go down to Lamentations 3 and 25. The Lord is good unto them that wait for him, to the soul that seeketh him. The Lord is good, but you have to wait. Again, if you want a good life, you have to build your life up. You have to wait. And while you're waiting, you're not waiting and complaining. You're waiting and seeking after God. When your life is not going quite the way you wanted to go, where you envisioned it to go, you have to sit quietly and just keep seeking God's word. Verse 26, it is good that a man should both hope and quietly wait for the salvation of the Lord. That's so difficult today. First of all, to see hope in the midst of tragedy, in the midst of decline. That's hard right there, to see hope. But then to quietly wait for the salvation of the Lord. Oh my God. Most of us want to grumble, complain, tell our sad stories to the world. And even if we don't grumble to other people or complain to other people, we're complaining in our hearts. God, why did you let this happen to me? God, why did you let that happen to me? But we have to quietly wait for our salvation. We have to quietly wait for it. The time we're spending grumbling and complaining, we could be strategizing of how to come out of our condition. We're going to stop right here. We're going to pick up with this verse in our second segment. Until then, may peace be with you.